If Shedeur Sanders is truly one of the worst quarterbacks in 25 years, why did Jason Lloyd turn around and say he'd start him over Deshaun Watson? That's not just a contradiction. It's a credibility crisis. Lloyd's back-to-back takes during the same reflect a larger issue with sports media, sensationalism over substance. The video doesn't just call out the inconsistency. It picks apart the foundation of these hot takes, revealing how quickly narratives can crumble under basic scrutiny. If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed. What's often ignored in these critiques is the instability Sanders walked into. Rookies rarely thrive in chaos, and the Browns have provided plenty of it. Despite that, Sanders has shown flashes, arm strength, decision-making, and maturity that suggest real promise. This video insists on one thing: evaluating talent fairly, without letting media bias or contradictory opinions cloud the view. You heard it right. Jason Lloyd, NFL reporter, went on live radio and called Shedeur Sanders one of the worst quarterbacks to suit up in 25 years. Not bad, not struggling, worse in a quarter century. But barely a breath later, the same guy said he would start Shedeur over Deshaun Watson for the Browns. That wasn't a joke. That wasn't satire. This wasn't a gotcha moment from an old clip. It was one sit-down, one mic, one opinion whiplashing in real time. And people notice. Fans, analysts, even former players lit up social media trying to make sense of how one of the most brutal critiques of a rookie QB somehow turned into a vote of confidence seconds later. The contradiction wasn't subtle. It was blatant. Lloyd's credibility took a hit the moment his own analysis collided with itself. If Sanders is truly that bad, how is he somehow still better than the Browns' $230 million quarterback? You can't have it both ways. This isn't about one hot take getting out of hand. It's about the layers of inconsistency piling up in real time. 1 second, Shedeur is beyond redemption. The next, he's a better option than a 3-time Pro Bowler. That's not commentary. That's chaos. Deshaun Watson's name wasn't thrown in lightly either. The comparison wasn't meant to flatter Sanders. It was supposed to be a wake-up call, but instead it backfired. It exposed how desperate and ungrounded some of these narratives have become. Lloyd didn't just undercut his own point. He revealed the foundation it stood on was shaky to begin with. Watson has his own set of controversies and on-field inconsistencies. But if Sanders is somehow both unplayable and preferable, then what are we even measuring? Sanders is a rookie. His performance hasn't been perfect. But the idea that he's already been written off, labeled a bust before he's played a full season in a stable system, isn't just unfair, it's lazy. And that's where media narratives start doing real damage. Lloyd's meltdown wasn't just about him. It became a case study in how fast public opinion shifts when it's based on half-baked data and emotional takes. The contradiction laid bare how media bias can drive a conversation. Not stats, not tape, not performance. Let's talk about what Shedeur Sanders has actually done. Yes, he's had turnovers. Yes, the touchdown count is low. But look at the Browns. Dysfunction isn't a side note, it's the headline. New schemes, coaching turnover, locker room instability, and a franchise that hasn't developed a QB properly in years. In that context, Sanders has shown flashes. Pocket awareness, arm strength, mobility, tools that scouts care about. He's made throws under pressure, extended plays, taken hits without folding. These aren't traits of someone in over their head. They're signs of a quarterback who needs structure, not sensationalism. Behind the scenes, Shedeur hasn't caused problems. There's no drama, no locker room incidents, no reports of selfishness or entitlement. He shows up, works, keeps his head down. The so-called baggage that Lloyd alluded to isn't coming from Shedeur. It's being projected onto him. His last name draws headlines, sure. But since when did being Deion Sanders' son become a character flaw? He didn't ask for the spotlight. He's not doing podcast bashing teammates or stirring controversy on social media. He's playing football and trying to earn his place in the league. The idea that Shedeur is a distraction, it's not rooted in anything but assumption. Lloyd's framing of Sanders as some kind of media circus is convenient for clickbait, but it doesn't hold up. Look at his pressers. Look at how he answers questions. Respectful, accountable, focused. There's a disconnect between who Shedeur actually is and how people want to paint him. And that's dangerous, because if enough people repeat it, it sticks. And before long, a rookie with potential is buried under a pile of narratives that were never true in the first place. It's also impossible to separate Shedeur's early struggles from the environment he walked into. The Browns have been a revolving door of coaching philosophies, offensive systems, and expectations that rarely match reality. They draft quarterbacks, break them, and repeat. How many rookies have thrived in that setting? How many quarterbacks, period, have made it out of Cleveland better than they came in? It's not an excuse, it's a fact. And it matters. Because if you're grading Shedeur Sanders like he had the same support as a Mahomes or a Hurts, your whole scale is off. Even the worst throws, the misreads, those don't define a quarterback forever. You know who threw more interceptions and touchdowns as a rookie? Peyton Manning. You know who didn't start a full season until year 2? Tom Brady. This isn't revisionist history. It's just history. Every quarterback has a developmental curve. Some rise fast, some take longer. But declaring someone a failure based on 8 or 9 games, especially in a dysfunctional offense, is reckless. Shedeur might not be a star yet, but he's far from a lost cause. What this all comes down to is accountability. In media, in analysis, in how we talk about athletes. Jason Lloyd got caught contradicting himself. But the real issue isn't the contradiction. It's the willingness to dismiss a young player entirely based on vibes. That kind of evaluation isn't just bad, it's damaging. It creates pressure that isn't earned, expectations that aren't fair, and narratives that ignore everything we know about how players grow. And when the people shaping those narratives can't even keep their own take straight, it's time to start asking better questions. Sanders deserves that. A real chance, a stable environment, coaches who know how to build, not break, and an audience willing to see the full picture, not just the highlight reels and hot takes. His journey isn't over. It's barely started. But if we keep letting contradictions like Lloyd's go unchecked, we might miss the whole thing. If you're tired of the noise and want more breakdowns that actually make sense, hit that subscribe button, drop a comment below, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Let's keep the analysis honest and the takes consistent. Shedeur Sanders hasn't asked for special treatment. He hasn't leaned on the Sanders name to shield himself from critique. What he has done is step into firestorm that is Cleveland football and try to make it work. That's not hype, that's guts. When he talks to press, there's no ego, no defensiveness. He takes the hits, owns the misses, and keeps it moving. That's rare for a rookie, especially one thrown into one of the most dysfunctional environments in the league. You can tell he understands what's at stake, but more importantly, that he's not folding under the weight of it. There are rookies who panic when the media spotlight turns hostile. Shedeur hasn't. Every report out of Browns camp points to the same thing. The kid puts in work. Coaches talk about how early he shows up, how locked in he is during film study, how he absorbs the system even when it's constantly changing around him. That's not baggage. That's foundation. And it's something you can build on if the people around him are willing to stop tearing it down with half-baked critiques and contradictory takes. Look at what he's dealing with. Quarterback rotations, receiver drops, misassignments, and a defense that doesn't always hold. The Browns organization is in a constant state of adjustment. Rookies don't succeed in chaos. They survive it. That alone says something about who Sanders is and what he's capable of becoming. Every quarterback needs reps. They need rhythm. Shedeur hasn't had either. He's been playing in stop-start conditions, with the pressure dialed up and the patience turned all the way down. It's a setup for failure, unless you can see past the surface and look at the traits that matter. Traits like composure, mobility, pocket presence. Shedeur is not running for his life every snap, but he's been forced to create when the play breaks down, and he has. He's shown the ability to keep his eyes downfield, throw on the move, and read defenses on the fly. Those are things you can't teach under pressure if the player doesn't have the mental wiring for it. And yet, We've got media voices painting him as some reckless, media hype disaster because he hasn't put up perfect stats in his first season. That's not just unfair. It's ignorant of how quarterback development actually works in the NFL. Jason Lloyd's comments didn't come from nowhere, but they also didn't come from a place of balance. That's the real problem. He didn't say Sanders was inconsistent. He didn't say Sanders needed development. He jumped straight to worse in 25 years, then flipped it around with I'd start him over Deshaun. You don't make two claims like that unless one of them, or both, aren't rooted in anything solid. This isn't about defending a player from criticism. Criticism is part of the game. But if you're going to criticize, at least be coherent. The moment Lloyd contradicted himself on live radio, he lost the right to be taken seriously in this conversation. And Shedeur noticed. You could feel in how he responded afterward, controlled but sharp. He didn't explode. He didn't go on a rant, but he addressed it directly. He called out the double standards, the narratives, the inconsistency in how young black quarterbacks are talked about in this league versus others. He didn't name drop Lloyd, but everyone knew what he was referring to. The idea that someone could demolish his talent and then casually call him a better starter than a $230 million vet is not just unprofessional. It's insulting. Sanders handled it with more maturity than most vets would. This whole situation has revealed more about the media than it has about Shedeur. The rush to label, the thirst for a viral take, the lack of patience. It's all part of the ecosystem now. But that doesn't mean we have to accept it as normal. Shedeur's journey is still unfolding. He hasn't written the final chapter. And if you actually listen to him on the field, in interviews, at pressers, he's not trying to be a brand or spectacle. He's trying to be a quarterback. It's the media that keeps turning that into something else. Even when he's been knocked down, literally and metaphorically, he gets up and keeps going. Watch the tape. He's taken hits and bounced right back up. He's thrown interceptions and followed them with solid drives. That's not flash. That's growth. And growth is exactly what you want from a rookie quarterback. It's not just about what you do when the play is clean. It's about how you respond when things fall apart. In that category, Shedeur has outperformed the narrative being built around him by miles. He's showing resilience, not regression. And let's be honest, the Deshaun Watson comparison didn't help Lloyd's case. If Watson is your measuring stick, then you better be consistent. Watson's had injuries, inconsistencies, and off-field distractions of his own. If Sanders looks more focused, more determined, and more accountable than the guy he's being compared to, then maybe the conversation needs to shift. Lloyd's take only made sense if you weren't paying attention. Or worse, if you were and you chose to ignore the facts anyway. There's a bigger message here. When media figures can say whatever they want, no matter how contradictory, and still dominate the narrative, players like Shedeur end up paying the price. They carry the weight of the headline, even when it's built on shaky ground. Sanders didn't crumble under pressure. He didn't lash out. He made it clear that he sees the game differently, that he knows the kind of quarterback he wants to become, and that he's not here to be anyone's storyline unless it's based on facts. We don't have to pretend he's flawless. He's not, but we should be able to separate truth from drama. If the people paid to analyze the game can't even stick to a single opinion for more than 2 minutes, then maybe it's time we stop taking their word as gospel. You know what doesn't make headlines? Practice, work ethic, the grind that happens when no one's watching. And yet, that's where Shedeur Sanders has built his case, away from the noise, away from the drama. The guy shows up and puts in the reps. Coaches say it. Teammates back it up. But that doesn't sell on a panel show. What sells is the idea that he's too flashy, too connected, too much baggage. A narrative that collapses the second you actually look at what he's been doing on the field and off it. You want to know why coaches still believe in him? Start there. When the play breaks down, Sanders doesn't panic. That's not hype, it's on tape. He resets, escapes, scans, and finds options. He's not perfect, but you can see the instincts forming. The timing, the processing speed, the decisions, they're accelerating with each game. That's development. A lot of rookies either flinch or freeze in those situations. Sanders doesn't. He's adapting in real time, despite a system that's barely holding together around him. And yet, Somehow, that's not the story the media wants to tell. He doesn't trash his teammates. He doesn't call out the organization. He could, and let's be real, a lot of veterans would have by now. But Shedeur stays locked in. Every time he speaks, it's we, not me. Every comment is team first, even when he's the one getting picked apart the most. That kind of leadership isn't something you fake, especially not when you're getting blindsided by takes like Jason Lloyd's. Sanders could have fired back, gone scorched earth, drag receipts, but he didn't. He just kept working. That's not just maturity. That's command. And that command is happening inside a Brown system that's barely giving him the tools to succeed. You've got rotating play callers, a shaky O-line, and receivers that aren't always where they need to be. Sanders isn't out there with a stacked deck. He's tried to make it work with scraps. Some quarterbacks have the luxury of easing in behind a veteran. Sanders was thrown into a mess. And instead of breaking, he's building. Slowly, inconsistently, but visibly. That's what makes the worst in 25 years take even more ridiculous. It erases the context completely. This whole narrative about Shedeur being overhyped, it's built on assumptions, not performance, not behavior. Just assumptions based on his last name and the media buzz around him. But here's the truth. The buzz isn't coming from him. It's being attached to him. He hasn't been chasing cameras. He's not making waves on social. All he's done is show up, suit up, and try to lead in the middle of dysfunction. If he didn't have the Sanders name, would people still be twisting themselves into knots to tear him down? Or would they be calling him a promising project? That's the part Jason Lloyd never addressed. He made a claim so extreme it was impossible to defend, and then try to cover it with another one that contradicted the first. That's not analysis. That's content for the sake of content. And it shows. No one's saying Shedeur is an all-pro right now. But if your commentary can't survive 5 minutes without contradicting itself, then it's not based on film. It's not based on scouting. It's based on emotion or worse, clicks. When Shedeur gets up in front of press, he doesn't feed that cycle. He speaks clearly, doesn't bite on bait, and never makes excuses. Even when asked directly about criticism, he focuses on what he can control. That's rare, especially for a rookie quarterback under scrutiny. He doesn't flinch, doesn't shift blame, and when he's asked about future expectations, he doesn't dodge. He leans into the challenge. That's leadership, not the flashy kind, not the quotable kind, the real kind that builds trust inside a locker room. Look at how he's handled everything thrown at him, from hot takes to organizational chaos, from busted plays to national criticism. He hasn't spiraled. He's focused. He studies tape. He improves. He keeps showing up. That's how quarterbacks earn their stripes in this league. The media can spin whatever story it wants. But inside the building, guys see who's working and who's pretending. And there's a reason players are still backing him publicly, despite the noise. You don't have to squint to see the flashes of potential, the tight window throws, the awareness under pressure, the ability to make something out of nothing when a play breaks down. It's there, not on every snap, but enough to see that with development, Sanders could be a real player. And that's the whole point. He's still developing. But the way Lloyd and others talk, you'd think his career arc was already complete. That's not just unfair, it's dishonest. Especially when you're talking about a rookie in the most volatile QB environment in the league. The game is fast. The pressure is real. And the margin for error is razor thin. That's where most rookies lose their footing. But Sanders is still climbing, still adjusting. The more reps he gets, the more the game slows down. That's what you want to see. Not perfection, progress. The media won't admit it, but that's the part they miss most often. They chase finished products, even when it's obvious a player is still in the lab. And when those players eventually hit their stride, suddenly everyone pretends they believed all along. We know the pattern. We've seen it before. But this time, we're calling it out. You can only be the media's punching bag for so long before people start to question the agenda. Shedeur Sanders has taken more heat in half a season than some quarterbacks deal with in 3 years. And still, he shows up to every press conference, owns every decision, and never deflects. That's not media training. That's character. If he were arrogant, we hear about it. If he were lazy, it would have leaked. But there's nothing, just noise on the outside and grind on the inside. That silence from inside the building, that's what you listen to. Because when teams want a guy gone, the whispers always start. But Shedeur, he's still getting reps, still earning trust. When you line up the film, it tells a different story than the headlines. The decisions are improving. The mechanics are tightening. He's making throws into tight windows, escaping collapsing pockets, reading coverages that gave him trouble just a few weeks ago. Does he miss throws? Of course. He's a rookie, but the highs are legit. The upside is real. And if this is what he looks like in year one, in the middle of a brown circus, imagine what he could be with time, stability, and a front office that doesn't panic at every stumble. Media loves to manufacture narratives. It's part of the ecosystem now. But at some point, you have to stop mistaking volume for truth. Just because someone like Jason Lloyd says it loud doesn't make it right. Especially when he can't go 5 minutes without tripping over his own logic. Shedeur didn't have to respond, but he did. Not with anger, just facts. With presence, with control. And that's what shook people. Not just that Lloyd contradicted himself, but that Shedeur answered the chaos with poise. That poise matters. Because Cleveland is a minefield for quarterbacks. There's no margin for error. But instead of cracking, Shedeur's been steady. And if you think that doesn't matter, you haven't been watching Browns football long enough. Let the hot takes burn themselves out. Shedeur Sanders is still standing, still working, still building. And if the media wants to keep underestimating him, that's fine. Because he's not chasing headlines. He's chasing progress. If you're ready for football analysis that cuts through the noise, hit that like button, drop your take in the comments, and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next time the media tries to rewrite reality. Let's keep the receipts and the standards real